Okay, on that note, as we let the Gypsy Kings go, I don't know how many of you know the Gypsy Kings. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me clearly? Yes? Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Many of you, as you know, will be joining us as we go. So, Naima, I just want to put a note. Please keep an eye on the room for us. And I want to welcome wholeheartedly Stephen and Ban, our hosts for today. Like, what an absolute pleasure to have you both with us. I don't know if you're familiar at all with our GLEAC community, but we have in this room, as our room gets full, I can assure you, and I'll have everyone here, we have people dialing from all over the world. Our mentor community, normally, if there's 10 of us in the room, there's like 8 countries being represented by the mentor community. So you have all different time zones, and everyone in this room from this community is really kind of doing something incredible. Everyone has stories. That's what they love about our community. They all have stories. They all have incredible journeys. Some of us are further along on our journey. Some of us are now starting on our journey. So today is really special, Stephen and Ban, because I honestly believe every single human being has a book inside of them. I birthed mines in 2016, but I think everyone here in this room has a book inside of them. So without any ado, let's get started with our speakers today. And the first one up is Stephen. So Stephen I came across earlier on this year for a book he was doing for a colleague of mine in the space. And I just loved the idea of what he is doing in terms of helping you create your books with the work that you're doing, with the community that you have. And I love the name Nuggets of Wisdom. I just think it's incredible, Stephen. What an absolute privilege and pleasure. You can share all kinds of stuff about yourself. I'm not going to go too much into it. And Ban. So Ban and I don't actually know each other. I know the founder of Kerning Cultures, who happens to be a very good friend, Heba Fisher. Heba's father, for all of you in the community, Dr. Omar Fisher, is in our mentor community. Kerning Cultures, I have literally seen it get birth from nothing, an idea of Heba speaking to me years ago, going, I have this idea for this podcast. And today I'm so proud to say that it's, hosting some of the top Arabic content in the region, recently signed with ICA. So, really, really excited about Ban's story. So without continuing on your biographies, I'm going to ask a question so people can get to know you, Stephen. And I'm going to pin both of you guys, Stephen and Ban. And I want you guys to share by answering these questions first, very, crisp, so the audience gets a feel for you. And then you're both going to have your individual presentations in terms of your journey of your books and how you work with your clients, how you build your own product. And then we're going to come back together and go into a breakout room. So everybody kind of knows the GLEAC format. So I'm going to get started with this question. Tell us about the most surprising or your favorite story so far you've made into a book or a podcast. And I'm going to ask Ban to start. Are you here, Ban?
I am here. Lovely to be with you all.
Yes.
Thank you for that intro, Sally. This sounds like a really wonderful community. And to jump right into this, so I guess this one probably because it's very recent and very fresh in my mind. One of Kerning Culture's most recent episodes was an episode called Sleeping Children. And it was actually something I had never heard about before until we got a chance to produce this podcast. And it's about this condition that is called resignation syndrome that affects children, asylum-seeking children in Sweden. And so our producer, Zena Duedar, did a fantastic job telling the story. I think as far as the syndrome goes, it's really in and of itself really kind of mind-boggling. It's about these children who kind of live in a comatose state for extended periods of time, and we don't really know why. But it's kind of how she got a chance to travel to Sweden and really tell that story firsthand. And I think that is really iconic of Kerning Culture's identity when it comes to storytelling. And I guess another one that really that is one that I got to produce. An example of also how we partner with different brands was one we got to do with Warehouse 421, which is an art gallery in Dubai. And it was a story about photography. So it was really nice to be able to speak to photographers. But my favorite thing about this is that anytime you get to take something visual and turn it into audio is such a fun challenge, because you get to be super descriptive, you get to play with sound, you get to play with pacing, and really anytime you get to talk to artists, it's fantastic. But the other reason I think is it's such a good example of how you can still be really kind of like true to your brand as a podcast network, and also work with others to partner up with other brands and businesses, and still create something that you're really proud of.
Oh, I love that. And I love that fact. You're right. You know, when you think of just photography and you think of turning that into a podcast, you know, in terms of the visual, I really do love that. And what about you, Stephen? Tell us the most surprising or your favorite story so far you've made into a book or a podcast.
Yeah, we've just literally finished our second book, and I'm very blessed to know a guy called Dr. Joe Vitale, that if you've ever watched The Secret, he was one of the teachers in The Secret, an incredible man. And we tell this story in the book about me, and I'll read you to it. At the time I was this was actually last year, I was experiencing complete resistance to what I was trying to create. You know, nothing was working at that period. So I thought, what do I do? So I thought, well, I'll just, I'll reach out to somebody I know. So, I emailed Joe and said, Joe, can you help me? All I'm experiencing at the moment is resistance. It's very painful. And his response to me was, and we tell this story in the book, that life doesn't resist, we do. So when we accept the current flow as divine, the resistance melts into acceptance. I was like, wow. And he carried on, when I stomp my feet and want life to give me what I want, I'm like a child that didn't get the candy. And the adult realizes that candy is not always good. So he goes, you have to accept it. Life is great, and you are, Steve. And that story and that little nugget story changed my life, because instantly then I was like, yeah, okay, it's exactly as it should be. Let it go, let the resistance go. And then when you let the resistance go, magic happens. And that was a little story that changed my life, and that's literally last year. So
I love that. I love that. And you're absolutely correct. It's one of those things in life. You are exactly where you are supposed to be at any given moment. And I think when you accept that, you are correct. You are open to allow things to happen. I often say when I'm teaching students, when you're like this, you can't put anything in. But if you're like this, the whole universe can deliver all kinds of surprises for you. I love that, Steve. Really do. Beautiful. Okay. My next question to both of you, what story would you tell about yourself if you were to write a book or create a podcast in one sentence? Let's go, Ban.
One sentence part. I love it. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'll do better than a sentence. I'll do a word. I'll do a podcast about unlearning.
Okay, I like that. All right, Steve, what about you?
So I do tell stories, and I write books about, that's what One Golden Nugget, the books are about. I tell our journey building this brand, and at times my struggle to do it. But the story is very simple, and it's one of never giving up. And that's been the case of my life since I've been 19. I'm 50 now, and it's like, no matter what's happened, I've always somehow managed to scrape myself off the floor and get back up again and continue. And so that is the only story I would ever tell. And that is my main advice to anybody. It's like, no matter whatever present circumstances are, and if you hit the floor, get back up again, continue.
Okay. And hold on, you're 50 young, Stephen. You're 50 young.
Yeah.
You're 50 young. You're 50 young. All right. So I'm going to have Stephen go first. And Stephen, we've allowed you to share your screen. So please share with us a little about your journey making books for others with One Golden Nugget. So you can take about 10 minutes and, do your presentation. And I know, Ban, you're going to talk through yours, which is absolutely fine. This is the beauty of being in the community. We can talk and present in all different ways. So Steve, you're up.
So my journey started at 19. I was working for, at the time, Chase Manhattan Bank, and I thought this is just is not for me. And I had an idea that I wanted to enter the music business. So I read a book about how to make money from the music business. Maxwell's on the call. He knows all about this. He's been on my journey since I was 19. Hello, my friend. And I bought 3 cassette decks and I replicated cassette tapes, you know, for local bands. And it would take me, you know, a 60-minute cassette tape would take an hour to do. I only had 3. So if somebody ordered 200, I'd sit there for hours. But, you know, I was kind of like, I'm making a little bit of money here. And by the time I was 26, I built, probably at that time, was one of the most famous dance music companies in the world. It was absolutely huge. I'll just share my screen with you quickly.
Yeah, hold on. You have all of us curious now.
So I went, this was my company called Dreamscape.
Okay.
So at 26, I'm promoting dance events for between 20, 25,000 people. You know, if they're paying £50 a ticket, you know, you can sort of get an idea of the sort of money. And I was 26. And I built a record label as well. And we used to make compilation albums and sold millions of albums. And it was an absolute empire. And the trouble was, at 26, I'd had no experience of money. So when the money came, I spent it and I wasted it. And it was a very interesting. It was a very interesting time, you know, especially being in the dance music scene. So I built this empire. By the time I'm 31, I'd lost the entire lot, and I went to work. At that point, you know, I ran out of money. The company went bust, and I went to work in a factory sweeping floors for £5 an hour. Given where I'd been, it was total humiliation for me at the time, and I lost my identity. I remember not coming out of my bedroom for a year because I just, you know, I completely crashed. And I had a family, 2 kids and a wife, and, you know, it was a very difficult time. So, you know, the Porsche went and my identity went, and my ego was, you know, I had an ego at that point, you know, huge ego. But I thought, what do I do at that point? You know, I thought, well, you know, if I go and get a job, I may well stay in that job for the rest of my life. And I didn't want to do that. So I went to work as a cleaner in a factory. It only lasted about 3 months. But what that experience taught me was humility. And that was a beautiful gift. And I didn't realize it at the time. I don't think often, you know, when those situations arise, we understand sometimes what the gift is. But it was a gift. And I learned humility. And then from that point, I then became a songwriter. I thought, well, you know, I'll have a career change. I'll become a songwriter. I'd always written music. So I started working on shows like X Factor and Pop Idol and those sort of, on those shows around the world, you know, writing songs for the artists and managing acts on the show and all that all that kind of stuff. And it was amazing. It gave me a glimpse into TV, and I absolutely loved it. And we just stopped sharing there. So that was cool, you know. And then I decided, well, I'll build a digital agency. You know, I quite like marketing, so I'll get into that. And so I built a digital agency, and unfortunately then I lost that, you know, because I didn't know what I was doing. I've never had this fear of anything. You just dive in and begin and get going. So, you know, that was then another crash. And then let me reshare again, sorry. And then I started doing some other things. I told you I share a picture of me naked. Well, this is me. I produced a record for a company called EDF Energy, which is a massive energy company. And we produced the record, and this is me at Radio 1 singing the record. And that's Scott Mills, who's one of our most famous radio DJs at Radio 1. I plugged the record on the radio. It started to become successful. So I started to have success again. And, you know, I remember that day clearly. You know, I was going to go out and sing to him, and all the press were there, and it was just like, what the heck on earth am I doing? But I remember Richard Branson dressing up in a bridal gown when he was promoting Virgin Brides or whatever it was. And I just thought sometimes you just got to dive in, and I did it. And it's one of my favorite memories, you know, from my journey, just because I just got on with it, you know. So after that, I crashed again. My life's been this, you know, build it, crash, build, crash, which is extremely painful, I must say. But, you know, like I said before, you always manage to get back up again. So after that, then I thought, at this point, I'm 45. And I've been going since I've been 19, you know, this kind of up and down. Extreme life in some respects, but, you know, I kind of like that, you know, I enjoy it. So then I thought, well, at 45, what on earth am I going to do now? You know, my last business has gone again. And I'd had this idea of One Golden Nugget, or I had an idea of collecting wisdom. So I just started asking people, you know, tell me one thing that I can improve. Tell me, you know, because I clearly had skills because I kept building these companies, but clearly I was missing other elements to my personality. And often that was because I tried to do absolutely everything, which is, you know, a key error. So I started asking people, you know, tell me one thing I can improve, and that turned into nuggets. And I found that everybody wanted to share, you know, their journey and what they've been through, and their nuggets of wisdom, and so it began. So the first nugget I collected was from this guy. So I'd previously had a business with him. His name's Warwick Davis, and he was in Harry Potter, and he played Yoda in Star Wars. So what a great nugget to kick off One Golden Nugget with. And when he told me his nugget, you know, I just started to think, oh, there's something in this, because you know, like that, expect nothing, you know, that's complete, you know, letting go, and love what you do and live in the moment. And I thought, well, if I shared that with somebody, you know, that may make a difference to them. Maybe they've been through what I've been through, because at that point I thought that I was the only one with problems, and I was the only one that had ever, you know, failed at anything. And of course that's not the truth. You know, everybody goes through something, but my little ego said that, you know, poor me, it's only me, you know, whatever. So I started collecting nuggets, and it went on from there. And the thing just started to create its own energy, really, because when you collect a nugget and then share it, and then people see it, and then they respond to it, and then they share it with somebody else, and it creates this beautiful esoterical energy, which is an absolute delight. So I started on that journey, and I thought, well, this is interesting. You know, I might write a book about it. You know, I've never written a book in my life. I thought, well, okay, well, I can do that. You know, I'm a songwriter. You know, I'm creative. Put some people around me that could help me, and we started writing book one, and then it continued. We did the first book. We launched a Kickstarter campaign, which was successful. I think we raised about 15,000 or something at that point, but we didn't really have much of a community or anything. It was just really in its infancy. So you know, I'm very proud of the fact that actually we completed that Kickstarter, and it worked. If it hadn't, I'm not sure what we would have done. But I remember literally, you know, a week before it hadn't completed, we was about £12,000 or something, and this guy came in and you know, practically gifted us £3,000 to help us get over the line, because he loved what we do. Mm-hmm. And that was a key message for me, that you know, he believed in what we were doing, so he was happy to help. So we did that, and then I continued to collect nuggets. This is one of my favorites. It's the head of Universal Music, Let It Go. You know, so many times we walk around and carry baggage with us. I mean, I certainly did. You know, what did they say to me? That's not fair. You know, all that stuff. Let it go. You know, just you know, be like the river. Emily, who was she was again somebody I met on the journey, and she was a key instrument for us. She helped me guide what One Golden Nugget would become. That's
okay. So Stephen, 1 minute, and I'm going to have you share the end part of your story.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, please.
1 minute.
Yeah, one minute, Stephen.
James Somerville, who's the head of design at Coca-Cola, who designed our brain. I met him on the journey.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now.
Wow. So in short, if it's one sentence, what One Golden Nugget does for what does it do?
Change lives. We collect and share wisdom and change the lives of people. And our purpose is to raise the consciousness of humanity.
Okay. Okay. All right. And who are your typical clients, Stephen, for your books?
Entrepreneurs, CEOs, individuals, anybody that's got a story to tell, and that's pretty much everybody. And I would absolutely share with everybody that tell your story. It doesn't have to be in a book, or it could be in a podcast, but tell your story, because it opens up a world you couldn't imagine. And be vulnerable and tell it with authenticity and truth. And the world delivers a beautiful gift to you. And I found it through what we've done, you know.
That's awesome. Stephen, thank you wholeheartedly for sharing. Ban, you're going to share the Kerning Cultures journey with us.
Thanks for that, Stephen. That felt like 2 minutes. Really interesting to hear the origins and the growth. Kerning Cultures, Sally, as you mentioned, you have known Heba probably far longer than I have, but I have been an avid follower and listener of the original Kerning Cultures podcast. So I'll just give you an idea of how it all started. So Kerning Cultures is now a network, but when it first started, it was just that one single podcast. So it was not even yet an empire or a network by any means. It was founded in 2015 by Heba Fisher and Razan Al-Zayani. Like I said, it was just that one podcast. It was in English. It was called Kerning Cultures. And I know kerning is a strange word to use, but just to give you an idea of what that means, it means the spacing between letters. So kind of when you're saying kerning cultures, it's kind of adapting that space between cultures. And I think that's, despite it being a little bit of a complicated word, it actually does exemplify what this entire brand is and what the network then came to be. And on that note, so a few years later, in 2018, Kerning Cultures was accepted into an incubator for media companies in San Francisco called Matter. And this is the turning point. This is the pivotal point where Kerning Cultures developed into a network, and the journey really started where we got to expand into the Arabic podcast market. Now, keep in mind that timing here was either really intentional or really lucky, because at the time, the Arabic podcast market was still very young and continues to be, considerably young in comparison, but is booming. There is hunger for Arabic content, and Kerning Cultures have been wanting to make Arabic content, fairly early on, and this was the possibility. This was the moment that it was actually able to do that. And so, long story short, since then we have grown to include about 13 shows plus and counting. There's plenty more to come. And the cool thing is, like I said, it's in 2 languages so far. Who knows how many more? But English was the first one. We have a couple of shows in English. You've got Kerning Cultures, which is the flagship show, and that's in English. And there's also Al Empire, but we've got quite a huge roster of Arabic shows. And what we've noticed is that it was an exciting time to see what people in the Middle East and North Africa and Arabic speakers around the world really were looking for and didn't know they were looking for, because it wasn't just about having a podcast in Arabic. It was about the type of content that we were creating, and this is why you'll see a huge variety in the podcasts that we have, including Bihub, which is a huge favorite, which means with love. And it's just that, it's a podcast about love, and it really challenges you to think about different ways that we love and feel passion and it could, and experience different emotions and also have complicated relationships with love and experiences. And I think making it one of our most successful shows because of that. You can see what people really wanted to what they were hungry for and didn't even realize, because you can see that through the engagement. Another one is Jasadi, which was one of the earlier ones as well. I believe it might have been the first Arabic podcast that we launched. And it's about our bodies and that experience. And you're talking about these conversations that are very much lacking from the Middle East, North Africa landscape. And here was this medium that was fairly new in the region, and where we could talk about these things in any structure that we chose. It wasn't an article, it wasn't a TV interview, it wasn't, not that there's anything wrong with any of those platforms, but it was a chance to really create this intimate medium between us and our listeners. And really, our listeners are just about anybody who speaks the Arabic language. And clearly we're looking for this, or didn't realize that, oh, we can talk about these things more honestly. We can talk about, feelings and thoughts and emotions, and be and disagree and share experiences. And there was suddenly this community of Arabic speaking podcast listeners that were very much drawn to Kurdish cultures because of that. And we realized that, okay, we're onto something here. And just to give you an idea of how much we've grown, we've had an opportunity to top charts. We hope the podcast I just mentioned was chosen as an Apple podcast show of the year in 2020 in the Arab world. Kurdish Cultures has been featured on the likes of Radiolab, if you're familiar, This American Life, Throughline, and some others. It was a Webby honoree for diversity and inclusion, and also one of my favorite podcasts that is a huge hit, a huge favorite in Arabic, translates to a superbly scientific podcast, has been the #1 podcast in Egypt for the past several weeks. And so you can see that there's quite a range in content, and there's a range in styles, and there are shows that we create that are very much about the story, very much more, they've got a little bit more, they're a little bit more dramatic, or a little bit, they're a little bit less lighthearted. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum, which, like Superbly Scientific podcasts, are almost like a monologue by the host, Ahmed Samid. And we realized that there are so many different ways to connect with our audience, and there's so many different ways for them to connect with us. And since then, we've recently had I guess we're having a little bit of a boom within Kurdish cultures. So, I don't know, it's kind of crazy to call us a startup at this point, because really expanding quite quickly. And also, this is where we've added a branded arm for the first time, where we're actually partnering with other businesses and brands to create more content. And this is where it becomes really exciting, because from day one up until today, what makes Kurdish cultures stand out is that idea of being curious, to approach every story we tell, regardless of whether it's an original show, whether it's a lighthearted show, or a dramatic show, or whether it's a fiction story. We've got Succubus Eclipse, which is our first fiction series, which is absolutely wonderful to experiment with, because we get to, again, play with so many different artistic mediums. So regardless of what the podcast is, here is our chance to really set ourselves to really deliver something that remains true to our identity. And I think that's what's helped us grow, and that's what's helped us thrive, and hopefully what's going to be our roadmap for future podcasts to come, because it's always that idea of remaining curious and respectful and honest in the storytelling.
Okay, thank you for that, Ban. Now, the reason I'm sharing both Stephen and Ban's story, I actually saw Kurdish cultures being born out of an idea, and this I'm saying to the community, of it being nothing, actually sitting with Heba, the founder, at the fountain by the Burj Khalifa, and she came to me and said, Sal, I think I want to create a podcast, and I'm going to quit my job. And I looked at her and I said, go for it. And to see that turn into an entire empire, and I want to share the context of that with every single one of you here, because most of us hear these stories and we think it's not us, and we think it's not, it's not our story, and we cannot build a podcast empire, or we really don't have, all of these people to build these books with these nuggets. And I'm here to tell you that it is you. It's literally that one step. It might not look exactly, it might not go exactly as you plan. It never does, right? It never does, right? Life, you're supposed to leave space for it to take your breath away. But, both of these stories are examples of how every single one of you right here in this room can have your own and this is really where the world is in terms of telling your stories, right? Think about before media existed, how did our ancestors actually share wisdom? They would sit around fires and tell stories, and telling your stories is just, whether in whatever medium, is such a powerful tool. So I'm going to keep going because we have some breakout rooms and all kinds of exciting stuff. So our first breakout room, we're going to divide you up into two rooms. Naima, are you on here to break everyone in a breakout room?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so the breakout room is going to be for a total of 8 minutes, and you're going to co-create with Stephen Ban a best-selling book or podcast series and come back and present it to us. It better be good, since we're going to make it into a movie. Okay, so breakout rooms, get to know each other, guys. Ban and Stephen, we have this incredible audience with all kinds of collective wisdom in the room. So everyone going to get divided up for 8 minutes, and then you come back.
We're here.
We're here. Okay. I have some people still coming in. Some people I think accidentally just left completely. So who's going to go first? What is the best-selling book or podcast series you're coming back to us with your group?
I can go first if you like.
Sure. Tell us, Stephen.
We're going with something massively topical, and that's Web3 and the metaverse.
Okay.
But specifically women leaders in the web. So it's a book about women leaders in the metaverse, and I've got some notes here. The possibility of equality in the absence of a glass ceiling. The Web3, the metaverse, becomes a level playing field that is about diversity and inclusion. It tells that story of where Web3 could take that community driven and very much focused on feminine energy in the metaverse space. So it tells that story, I think, possibly of how that would evolve and what that would look like. That's what we came up with.
Okay, and the movie, who's going to be who's going to be the actress in the movie?
Oh, it's a movie as well. Oh, of course it is.
Who's going to be the star actress? Hold on, let me see if somebody's giving you some ideas in chat. Okay, Coco is going great. You guys can help him in chat. Who's going to be starring in it, Stephen?
I don't know. My mum. She's my biggest fan, so she may as well star in it. Well, we need an icon, don't we? A young icon, that's highly feminine, brave, fearless.
Okay, good job. Okay, Ban, you're up.
Oh, okay. So we are creating a podcast about the potential of children and how far they can go to create a better future for them. And this podcast is actually placing the children at the center of it. So we ask them questions that they want solved, and we bring in experts to help us contextualize that and understand it better. It's done in a very approachable manner. So it would be a scripted podcast also to help us avoid any sort of ethical boundaries with speaking to children. So we can choose the sound bites and tape very, very intentionally. and it would be for a mass public, so not for the scientific community. It was for parents, teachers, for kids themselves. So it'd be simplified language and a more intimate way to approach what would otherwise be maybe a very complicated scientific.
Okay, very cool. And Ban, who's starring in it? The movie.
Who are the kid actors these days? It's a documentary. It's like an explained documentary series.
Okay. All right. Good job, guys. Good job.
I like this.
Sally Ann, I think we're going to go with Emma Watson to star in our film.
Oh, you're going. Listen, you got help on that. You got help on that. I saw that.
No, I just thought of that myself. It's not in the
Hold on. That was not a nugget that came out of you, Stephen. That came out of somebody else.
Okay, well.
Okay, so a couple of questions, for both of you, for our audience here, who, hopefully you've inspired every single one of them that they have a book or podcast within them and that they're going to actually act on it, right? Because it's one thing to think we have one in us, then it's another thing to act on it. What are the 5 biggest missteps, up to 5, in getting started on building a podcast empire or getting your first book published? Like, what are some of the common things you see that kind of goes wrong?
Should I start with
Sure.
that?
Go ahead.
I think first of all, it's always about focusing on your audience, and whenever we do anything, the intention is so that the reader leaves with value, that it's changed their life. So I think sometimes, and certainly I remember on the first book, I was just waffling away about myself, about random stuff, and then the editor, they stripped it out, because it has to have value for the reader, and it can be so easy to kind of just disappear into your own ego at times. And it's not a novel. We don't write novels. We write books that change people's lives. So I think that's certainly one that's really the major thing. I know you want 5, but for me, it's always about focusing on the reader.
Okay. And that's fine. I said up to 5, right? Up to 5, right? Our brain can only handle 5 things at a time.
Well, my brain can only handle one thing, and that's
So hold on, guys. There's science behind that. In the perfect world, we can handle 3. There's a reason why. It's like 3 blind mice, 3 colors on flags, phone numbers are 3 digits. I bet you guys didn't know that. Yeah. 3 musketeers. There's a reason. There's science behind that. And the most we can go is 5. So there's a reason, right? Me and my nerdiness. I have some nerdy reason for asking it. So Ban, let's hear you. What about you? What are some missteps in terms of a podcast?
I think a couple would be, so one of the things is not to create a podcast just for the sake of creating a podcast. I think you want to be really intentional and think about why you're creating it. I mean, it could just be that you really love the medium, but it's a reason, right? Not just if it's not something you love, then and you're just doing it to be part of it, is not enough of a reason. Like, really ask the why. I think that's one of the things. I know it's exciting to be part of everything, but to be very intentional with it is important. I think the other thing I would say is, a lot of times, yes, it can be practically free to create a podcast, which is great. And a lot of people do that. And some people have huge success with that. But generally speaking, if you want to create an ambitious podcast, people underestimate, I think, time and cost of production. And it's good to be realistic about those things, because it does take a lot of effort. Another one would be is not to emulate others' success. I think there's so many podcasts out there that we admire and we do use for inspiration, and that's great. And they've really set the trend of what a great podcast is. But I think everybody's success is different. And you'll see this even at a network, right? So every podcast has its different success for a different reason. This one might be a favorite in a certain country or region, and this one might be a huge success because of the partner or the brand that it's associated with. So it's really different. And I think every podcast has its own success. And I think we just all need to honor that as we get started.
Okay. what are some of your favorite platforms for those who want to, publish their book or podcast on their own? Right. So let's assume that, we're very budget conscious and we just want to tinker and try. What are some of your favorite platforms, Ban and Stephen, for someone who wants to tinker?
Shall I start?
Right.
Yeah, with the book, it's very easy. I mean, Lulu, for example, you can do print on demand. So you get you create your book and you send it to Lulu, and then when somebody orders, they print one book and send it out to the customer. You can then go on to Amazon and list your book and with Amazon Kindle and you're away. It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, very cool.
It's as simple as that. Just begin.
Okay. What about you, Ban?
I love that it's that simple. I had no idea.
I had no idea either. I was like, really? You mean in 2016 when I published my first book, I didn't have to spend all this time like getting a publisher, printing thousands of Stephen, like you should have told me that back in 2016.
I've just given you our secrets away, haven't I? But who cares? Everybody should be writing books.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Ban, let's go.
I think just to that end, I think it's, just to take inspiration from Stephen, I think it's a similar, if for somebody who's curious and wants to get started with podcasting, is you can literally just start off with your own voice and a blank document and start scripting. But I would say, and also listening, I think there's, listen to as many podcasts as possible, because that's free. That is entirely free. Any streaming service that you use to listen to music, Spotify, Apple, whatever, listen as much as you can, explore, find out what you like, listen to the details in it, because that is the best thing you can do before you get started, in my opinion. And then just a few basics, if you want to get to, the playing around part, you can use an editing software will be your best friend. I would recommend Audacity because it's free. And you could just do that on your computer. And then if you want to upgrade, you can do Audition, but that's a paid service. And then I would invest in a good quality USB mic that you can plug into your computer and just start recording, and headphones. Whatever headphones you're using would be fine to start with, but those would just be the basics. And then, once you want to publish, there's something called a podcast host. So things like Omni and Buzzsprout, and there's a whole bunch of them. You can find the one, and to get started, these do not have to be expensive at all, but it's just something to get your podcast out there, and it gives you a feed that you can then distribute to other streaming services. But yeah, just start with a mic, with a free editing software and a pair of headphones, and script away, and you are good to go.
And I saw there was a question there about editors and designers, etc. So I know for me, when I was doing stuff for not the book, but after the book, a lot of our curriculums and some of our editing of my articles, etc. I use a service called Reedsy, everyone, Reedsy, which is for authors, and you can find everything there about publishing, writing, design. So whenever I need a quick resource, just, to look over some of like my white papers, it can go from pure academic to other stuff. That's a great resource for all of you on there. Okay, let's keep going. Next question. How can one utilize books and podcasts to build their brand and business? And I really want you to get specific about this with a use case you've had. So not generic, but maybe talk about, if you can't mention the customer, a particular customer, and how you're going to either you have in the past, or you're going to build a product for them that can really help their brand and their business. Stephen, you want to start?
Absolutely. So of course it comes down to telling stories, but a real case example, and she's on the call now, is Rosia Perez, who's one of our founders, and we're doing a book with Rosia at the moment, and it's called The Hispanic Journey. So it brings together 20-25 Hispanic leaders from all across the world that tell their story and share their nuggets of wisdom, and that's just a beautiful gift to offer the world, because there's so many young Hispanic people that maybe need that inspiration, and they need those role models to tell those stories. So that's one real life example we're doing at the moment, and it's just beautiful to see it evolve. And of course, when it's out, then it will change lives, and that's when building your brand, regardless, it is about telling stories, because it becomes emotion, and you build it with love, and then people buy into your story, and they buy into you, hopefully, and that's that. You don't need to sell anything in life. You just put out there who you are and tell that story, and then the brand develops because of it. And that would be my advice to anybody. It's just, tell your story with authenticity and vulnerability, not from an ego point of view, but from what you've learned and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then that comes down to having purpose again, and doing it for the right reasons.
Okay.
So that would be my advice.
Thank you for sharing that, Stephen. And I do have to say to all our mentors here, one of the discussions that Stephen and I have to pick up, I've just been, everybody kind of knows I wear 1,000,001 hats, is actually, our conversation had started, Stephen and I, about creating a book of all of our mentors within our mentor community and having them share their stories through a GLEAC mentor community nuggets, because all of you have such incredible stories in terms of sharing your story. So Stephen, yes, I gave you a date, like I'll come up for air in a couple of weeks, and I will start that discussion again. What about you, Ban? How can one utilize book and, share a story of a particular client, if you can't name the client, how they've really used it as part of their branding or their business model?
Yeah, there's actually, the cool thing about podcasts is that the possibilities are sort of endless, and it's great because you can kind of adapt it to whatever your business or whatever your brand's needs are, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, I need to create an entire podcast. It could be, maybe we can partner up on a single episode. I'll give you an example. So Bihub, our Arabic series about love, we had an episode sponsored by Penhaligons, and it was about the memory of scent. And it was so lovely to have this again. This is another, what I was saying at the start of the session, is you can find ways where you are so aligned with these brands and businesses to tell really exciting stories, which is really our intention at KC, but also these brands that really want to get these very genuine stories out, and they want them to be relevant, right? They want to be represented by it. And we've had a few other ones, like I mentioned, for Warehouse 421, but also in the world of fiction. So we had, you can create a fiction podcast. So Toyota sponsored that, and felt like it was something that was, that world of young talent and art and storytelling was important for them as a representation. I'd say perhaps the most exciting one that we had was Expo 2020 Dubai. We worked very closely with them. So we produced their 3 podcasts while the event was happening. And it was so beautiful because for them, they were so, they knew exactly what they wanted why they wanted to create a podcast, right? And they did 3 different ones, which was Inside Expo, People and Planet, and Innovate with Purpose. And each one had its own format and purpose. And the reason is that they wanted to tell their story. They wanted to tell their history while it was being made. And that content will forever be there. It's in their national archives. That is their long-lasting impact for generations to come. They want these stories to be told for, future generations, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, where they can hear them and be like, oh my gosh, this was happening. It was captured in real time. And so I think that is probably one of the best examples of how we got to work together to really tell honest stories. It wasn't an advertisement. It was a way to really bring your identity out into the world in a way that was very genuine and impactful at the same time.
I have a question. I noticed recently you guys signed with, is it ICA, which, manages all the famous people? Like, what is that all about?
Yes, actually, so that is exciting.
Very quickly, just tell us very quickly what that is about.
Yeah, very, very quickly. So this is actually, it's CAA. It's
sorry.
That's okay. It's a creative artist agency, and it's so exciting. So we've teamed up for them. It's leading entertainment, sports agency. And so this is the first time that an influential talent agency signs with a podcast network in the Middle East. And what they're going to do is we're going to be working with them closely to find opportunities to adapt existing podcasts for like TV, films, and books. So maybe our idea that we just came up with in the breakout might end up being adapted at some point.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Okay. All right. Hold on. I think this is our last question. What's your favorite podcast and book right now? And you can't say your own.
Oh.
What's your favorite podcast and book right now? And everybody, why don't you write in chat? What is your favorite book and podcast right now? Share in the chat. Let's go. What is your favorite podcast and chat right now? And Ban, Stephen, what's yours?
Not ours. So forever, as you know, for me, it's forever Radiolab. It's my inspiration for everything. The reason I love it. But if I had to pick just one amazing one, it's called S-Town, and it's just probably the best storytelling I've ever heard in a podcast.
Yeah. Okay. And what about you, Stephen?
I think the beauty of books is that you read a book and then you reread a book and you see something in it you didn't see before, because you often you've changed. So for me, it's a book by a guy called Charles Harnell, which is years old now, maybe 100 years old or something like that, and it's called The Master Key System, and it's what The Secret was based on, and it's more about the esoterical hidden world of life, energy and intention. And for me, that's just a wonderful read, and I just keep going back to it over and over again, because, as I say, I see something different in it every time. I'll put it on the channel.
Wow. So on that note, hold on, let me stop my share. Hold on. How do I do that? How do I stop my share? On that note, 1 second, guys. Stop share. There we go. On that note, I would like to say a wholehearted thank you to Ban and Stephen. Everyone, how did Ban and Stephen do? This means they did okay. This means good. This means they knocked it out of the park. Let me see with hands. How did Ban and Stephen do? Wow, Coco is giving you guys a big one. There you go, Lori. Ban and Stephen, you guys did awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ban and Stephen, for sharing your absolutely beautiful stories for us and your journey. For everyone, a couple of things. So we have another event starting in 15 minutes. For those of you, just stay, we'll put music on. For Ban and Stephen, in the chat, you guys will find a Trustpilot link. Please share anything you want to share with Ban and Stephen about their session. Naima will post the Trustpilot link in chat for you. Ban and Stephen, also, can you please post your LinkedIn profiles in chat? Again, any of you who are looking to do your books, do your podcast, get feedback, please reach out to them. That's the beauty of our community, right? Reach out to us. Because within the community itself, there are many of us within the community that can help you get on your way in terms of the books. And Ban and Stephen, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for sharing all this wisdom, all of this knowledge with us wholeheartedly. I can't wait to see, hold on, all of us get royalties for the ideas we gave you for books and movies. If we see a movie, all of us are going to come and we want credit on it. Okay. So guys, a huge applause to all of you. And for the rest of you, please stay on. I'm going to put some music on for you. And our next event starts in 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Bye.